I link back, people really understand now the importance of good BPM and utilizing the tools to further support us working again smarter, not harder necessarily.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Well, welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. Today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Brendan Healy. Now, Brendan his role focuses on business processes and operations within a company that they're a medical device company. But Brendan's history and experience extends as far back as 12 years in terms of his BPM experience, process management. I guess his work's been relating to all different areas of process. So I'm really excited for this interview. Brendan, thanks for joining me.
Hey Daniel, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, business process management, a topic close to my heart, and thanks so much to taking the time to share some thoughts on it.
Great. So what we might do is maybe if you want to take us back to the start of your journey, where the interest for process first, I guess, came from. I guess for a lot of people that end up in the BPM space, they naturally have a sort of a process-centric way of looking at things, or a process lens. They're looking for the process. They're looking for how can we improve this. But take us back to day one and where that, I guess, interest in process first was sparked.
Okay, sure thing. So, yeah, look, my background was, really from a very scientific upbringing. My qualifications, I did my degree and my PhD in molecular microbiology, and then really from there, I knew I didn't want to be an academic, so I started in the food industry for a big FMCG multinational, and really that was my first introduction to process management, and it was quite an interesting and steep learning curve, because I went from a very structured and formal scientific driven approach to this is the reality from the ground floor in a factory, and manufacturing grade A food materials, and really it was a great learning for me on the balance between, on paper, what is a structured process management approach and what's important versus the reality of people on the ground floor in a factory, and do they understand what they do every day and how that links into it. And for me, it was a very easy and clear difference. I was in food manufacturing, where if we got it wrong, potentially we kill a person. So it was that simple. It was saying, follow the process, because you can't afford to get it wrong. And it was great. So, again, it was that balance of linking what processes have been mapped out versus the reality on the ground floor. So really that was my first introduction to process management. And from there, I've always been really passionate and interested to understand, how do we improve process management, and putting more structure around that to support the reality of in operations, in particular the people on the ground floor, and how do we link what they do every day to the bigger picture of what we're trying to strategize in BPM.
Right. No, that's good. And I think it is, it's an interesting, I guess, perspective on, or not perspective, but insight into working with food, that you're so right. If the process is stuffed up, or if the process isn't followed, then there are consequences, and in some organizations, the consequences aren't as severe as someone losing their life. But I think that, for not following a process, and I guess, that all ties back into how are the processes managed? Are they documented? Are they understood? How is the general employee understanding the processes within the organization? But there are consequences. If processes aren't followed, then that you may get an output or an outcome that you weren't striving for. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that key aspect, that culture development, that mindset shift of the why, yes, every day what we do, how does that link to the bigger picture and why it's important? As long as you can tap into that piece, I think then you get a very good balance between, good design of business process, and then also the reality on the ground floor of people living and breathing it and caring about what they do.
Yes, yes. Now, in the organisations that you have worked with, has that sort of process push been driven by senior management, or has it been driven by someone internally? Because I know that for some of the organisations I'm talking with, senior management or the CXO level, if they don't come from that sort of process-centric way of looking at things, then it is a new and foreign topic to them to some degree. And so I'm talking with some people that are internal, maybe, I don't know, involved in some level, but lower down. But they're noticing the need to have their processes documented and a way for them to be improved. What's your experience been like? Has it always been driven from the top down, or?
Yeah, very good question. For me, the best and most effective processes and the management have been a healthy balance of the two. I think, traditionally, a lot of senior execs want, very rigid control of process and say top down, it's pushed and this is it, follow this. It's not a choice. And in reality, for some industries, that has to have that level of control more so. If I look at, the banking industry or medical device industry I'm now in, there are a lot of regulatory requirements that it does require quite strict process management. On the flip side, I can imagine that startup businesses, fintech companies, I know there is more of a push for looser, more agile process management approaches, because they don't want to restrict that innovation early on. So really it's a healthy balance between the two. And I'm very fortunate where I am today that I have the top down support and guidance from the senior leadership within the business, but also the freedom in my role to help build the linkages from the ground floor up. So really, we're experiencing really good traction. We've got a healthy balance from the guidance and making sure we're compliant from a regulatory point of view at the top-down approach. But the senior execs and our senior management all realize that we have to make it workable for people. So we have to build it from the ground floor up, and I think that healthy balance is where we're at the moment. Which the proof is in the results, which we see every day.
Right. And how do you get that buy-in from the general employee? Because it's one thing to get that buy-in and that sponsorship from that senior management level, but then it's another thing to actually get people to work with you. Because I mean, it might be something instilled from senior management, but there are a whole range of I guess resistance or objections that might come up when working with different people, and one of them that comes to mind is the well, why are we documenting my processes down? I already know what I need to do. Are they thinking about replacing me? Different thoughts, different resistance, different objections could arise. So talk to us a bit about how you've seen that done well, where it's introducing something new to a company culture, a company team, and you're obviously trying to get that buy-in.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that really taps into the heart of why I'm quite passionate about BPM. It is that balance. I've seen execs where they say, well, I want a better tool, I want a better software. And, my pushback to that is always going, guys, do we know what we're trying to achieve first? Like, stop, pause, because process management can work from pen and paper initially, mapping out what are you trying to actually achieve. So, the tool and the software will only speed up poor information. If you put bad information in, the results coming out will be bad even quicker. So really, for me, it's don't jump to the tool and the solution. Let's take a step back and really go, okay, brown paper mapping, post-it notes on the wall. What is the the physical flow, what is the information flow, what value are we trying to achieve, and where are the risks to the business today. Literally, to do that, it's just get ourselves around some brown paper mapping, and let's start doing the basics from scratch. And I think that's at the heart of what makes good process management. Tapping into people at the ground floor up, going, why do you care? Like, at the end of the day, I can map a process flow and make it look really pretty and presents very well as an overview. But how do I link that back to what you do every day, and why do you care? Well, let's use this exercise in driving process management to make life easier for you. Let's work smarter, not harder. That's the buy-in. And I think as long as you can link that back to, the people doing the legwork, in reality on the ground floor, going, why do you care? This is going to make your life easier. The goal isn't to replace you. The goal is to actually remove some of the redundancy and the non-value add, and therefore you actually have a bit more time free to focus on the value add and focus on yourself and your development. You are very valuable. I've always worked in operations where you need good people. No one's successful with the best process management tools in the world without good people in operations. So, my approach is always saying, let's free you up from the less important stuff, automate some of the workflow through good business process management, and then you're freed up to add value in much more important ways.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's so important to have that big picture of why are we doing this? Why are we documenting the processes? Because for some organizations, they might have embarked on a process documentation exercise maybe 5 years ago, but after it was documented, what their work wasn't looked at again. And so senior management's going, hang on a second, why did we do all of that work to model or map our processes if it's just sitting there collecting dust, so to speak? And I think it's so important, as you were saying, to recognize the big picture. Where can we look for those incremental improvements? How can we make your life or your job easier? How can we make it so that you're more excited to turn up to work every day?
Oh, absolutely. And, the thing for me is always that the proof is in what we make. So let's not talk about it, walk the talk. So I think it's really important to have that credibility and to do that, but to build that trust at the ground level. Really, it's about, me as the owner of business process management and leading the operations side, to say, got to roll my sleeves up, got to, do the dirty work, show that, I appreciate and understand things from the ground up, and, use that to feed the reality into some of maybe the strategies that the global execs are trying to drive. And really, as I say, it's a credibility and trust piece. So I say, trust me, I guarantee, I'll do the hard work with you, and what will come the other side is a better life, and we'll work smarter together for everyone. So really, it's building that credibility from the ground floor up.
That's great. That's great. And talk to me a bit about, obviously, there's been a real push in the last few years of organizations wanting to be agile, wanting to move quickly, wanting to make changes and to adapt, and to not be, I guess, weighed down too much by structure. I guess that might have been brought on by that there are startups that can, in the matter of a couple of years, can really wipe out a whole industry, or really, I should say, disrupt a whole industry. And so large organizations need to, adopt a bit of that thinking, a bit of that mindset that, hey, we need to stay on our toes. We need to be continuously making improvements, because if we're not going to disrupt our own company, someone else could come along and disrupt it for us. So talk to us a bit about how BPM and agile, how they work hand in hand. How do they complement one another? And should they be done hand in hand, or are there points where you should be focusing on one over the other?
Yeah, look, it's again a great question, and I think you framed it really nicely. For me, it's very dependent on the industry you're in. As I said, medical device, there's a lot of regulatory requirements and a lot of fundamentals that are tightly controlled for a very good reason. I think it's an interesting one when you look at the changing in BPM, and I link it back to my earlier days of becoming qualified and leading programs in Lean Six Sigma. I think a lot of these tools and frameworks and techniques, they can be applied, those principles, across the board. I link good BPM to the philosophies and principles of a lot of Lean Six Sigma, and looking at flow and really looking at the value chain end to end. So for me, I'm much more focusing with my teams on really the soft skills, the skills of saying, I'm not looking to spoon feed everyone. I'm not trying to restrict your innovation, your creativity. I'm going to look at the soft skills that you can look at the bigger picture and apply those lessons and drive those improvements. So I think it is an interesting time at the moment to look at what skills really support BPM moving forwards, and how BPM itself is going to change, because we have the advancements in technology and data mining, and I think having information at our fingertips is becoming more and more critical. Industry 4.0 is really looking at smarter tools and availability of information. So I think we've never had more information available at our fingertips. Now, have we got the right skill sets and the right frameworks in behind to actually use that information to add value in real time back into our process, into our deliverables? So depending if it's manufacturing and having real-time analytics on a production line, whereas what's in medical device, our end-to-end supply chain, what are the risk areas, what are the red flags that are popping up, do we jeopardize the business with non-conformities to some of our processes? And again, the advancements in tools and data availability and analytics is an amazing tool, but I just want to make sure at my end we're skilled the right way to interpret and add value with that available data.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's obviously been quite a growth in the different tools available to understand and to I guess to process all of the data within an organization. We've got process automation, we've got robotic process automation, we've got process mining now. We've got all these different sort of tools that are coming to market that are helping organizations not only understand but also automate things. How can we leverage these tools to free up our workforce to, I guess, be focusing their time on the higher value activities, and how can we stick a robot in there and make the robot do the more tedious, repetitive work. But talk to us a bit about, I guess there's a risk that comes along with that if organizations dive in, and I have heard it, I haven't been involved directly with an organization, but I have heard stories where an organization, they'll dive into process automation, for example, but the time, energy and thought and headspace hasn't been put into ensuring that they've got good processes to begin with. Because if you, as you mentioned earlier, I think maybe in our conversation before we got started, if you just automate rubbish, it's just going to spit out rubbish much quicker. So talk to us a bit about, I guess, maybe the risks and how an organization should approach some of these new technologies.
Yeah, look, and again, it's for me, it's all about healthy balance. I think, depending on the industry, there is significant risk posed by jumping in too quickly. On the flip side, you've touched on the adapt or die almost if you're not innovative enough. So really, it is a healthy balance. For me, You know, again, it's focusing on, you know, when you look at your business processes and what your strategy is, really, what are you trying to achieve? So is it adding more value in the chain to customers and killing off the redundancies? Is it, you know, more of a risk mitigation around what are the red flags potentially end to end in our business? And, you know, if I think of some examples in my time, it's been where we've, you know, we may have acquired different businesses over a period of time, and really the risk to the business is how do we consolidate the business process management side. We might be operating on different ERP systems. You know, the culture of one business being acquired by another, it's almost us and them potentially in some instances. And how do we fold that acquired business in under our umbrella? And take the positives. You know, there may be quite a number of instances where their processes and procedures, you know, are best in class compared to our own existing. So how do we utilize those good practices and fold it in under our existing structure, all whilst, you know, for me, the mindset is, you know, don't introduce new risk. You know, we're always trying to remove the risk for the business. So I think looking at that, you know, it's very important to not rush into looking at what BPM software you're going to select and purchase to help you, because as you rightly said, you know, tools only speed up bad information, and if you have bad information, that's the root cause that you got to kill first. So I think going back to basics of understanding what are you trying to achieve, mapping out literally with colored post-it notes on brown paper, mapping I still find is one of the most effective tools. You know, and getting all insights from all angles in the business. You know, I typically have more of a lens from an operations management and a business process point of view, and really getting those, you know, finance inputs, sales and marketing, voice of the customer inputs, really end to end. You know, for sure, it's I can't over stress the need to take the time to do the preparation up front before jumping in and committing to a BPM software to really speed things up, because once it's in, things move very quickly.
Yes. And talking about, you mentioned growth by acquisition there, and obviously trying to consolidate different systems and platforms. And I guess you've got organizations out there that it may not be growth by acquisition, or it may be more they have 17 different factories, for example, and that they're understanding, well, why is this one factory outperforming all of the others? What processes do they have in place, and how can we mimic what they're doing across the others? Or you could have 1,700 different shop fronts, for example, and there's a select group of shops that are that are clearly outperforming the others. And so what processes and systems do they have in place? But talk to us a bit about, I guess, a little bit further about growth by acquisition and what that looks like in terms of, I guess, consolidating all of those different, not just the platforms and the systems, but the processes, and understanding how do you do that on such a big level and such a big scale?
Yeah, look, it's you know, it's definitely not, I think, a one size fits all solution. But for me, you know, I've been very fortunate early on in my career that, you know, I was exposed to a large corporate FMCG that, you know, really had a great culture in looking at best practice sharing, total business process improvement, and really link that to a framework of kind of driving Lean Six Sigma methodologies. But, you know, to touch on the point you made about different factories, different countries, that was exactly what we were trying to achieve. We said, look, we have similar technology in maybe 14 different countries, split around Europe and APAC at the time. And we were saying, how do we really utilize the skill sets, utilize the knowledge that's already sitting in various aspects around the world? So really how we went about that was, you know, develop a program which rolled out the principles of, you know, good process improvement through kind of Lean Six Sigma, our own version of that, that gave people the tools and the terminology and the frameworks to have a common language to drive it. And we said, look, we're not trying to restrict what's already happening in each different site. However, what we do need to leverage is the good practices and start to look at why the differences. So we try to establish a baseline of saying some are performing better for various reasons, but this is the standard we want to establish across the board so that we can then look at the improvements. And we're not going to rush to jumping and assuming we know all the improvements. Let's establish the baseline across the board first. So really it was a program that took time on, you know, providing the skill sets, providing the tools and the framework, without limiting people's creativity and innovation at the same time. And how we did that was a real positive culture shift, empowering our people with the right capabilities to do that, to lead it for themselves, and establishing a network of, you know, good practice sharing, much like, you know, this podcast series, you know, you're driving yourself. It's great just to be able to bounce those ideas off other people, you know, take good practices. And the big thing for me around BPM is, you know, don't reinvent the wheel for the most part. There's already very smart people, much smarter than me, that are already tackling a lot of the issues we face today. So, you know, build those connections, build the network, and share the good practices, you know, and for sure, you know, someone else is already doing it if you want to look at it. You just got to find the right people.
Yeah, that's right. And now looking at the current climate that we're sitting in, obviously the coronavirus, it's disrupted a lot of organisations, and for some organisations it's wiped them out altogether, and for other organisations it's actually, I guess, allowed them to thrive in the current environment because it's playing to their advantage. Now, my feeling is that we're getting towards the end of it. I feel like we're through we're at the point now where restrictions are starting to lift, you know, so we're starting to have different rounds of restrictions lift, and organizations are now looking forward and thinking, okay, how are we transitioning, not necessarily back to what we were, but because I think in this season a lot of organizations have learnt a lot of different things, and there'd be a lot of new ideas and thoughts running through different people's minds about what's necessary in terms of workplaces, work environments, how we communicate. I mean, for some organizations, procurement was completely cut during this period, and so there was no investment made, and then for into anything. And then for other organizations, things like business process management has skyrocketed to the top of their priority list, because all of a sudden everyone's working from home. You can't just turn to your right, turn to your left and ask your neighbor, oh, what do I do here? Or what's the next part of this process? And senior management, they can't walk through the office space and I guess have a visual that things are getting done. They're working from their own remote workplace. So I guess, like, in saying all of that, I guess to give you a question to respond to, like, what do you think is next? Or how do you think organizations are going to transition from this season back into whatever the future looks like? Maybe not back, but into what the future looks like. But I guess specifically from a BPM or a business process point of view, do you think it's sparked thoughts or questions or concerns in the minds of different people?
Yeah, look, I fully appreciate, you know, COVID has definitely changed the landscape, you know, across the board. And, you know, again, I've been fortunate to work in a space where, you know, it's posed some really good challenges for us to overcome. You know, I think it's really tested supply chains, obviously, in recent times. And for us, you know, I've been really proud and very fortunate to have a team that have responded so well to it and work in a business that really has embraced more agile approaches to working. And for sure, post-COVID, you know, it's never going to look the exact same. We have much more flexible work conditions and people working from home currently. So linking it back to BPM, I think, you know, in my experience, COVID has been the great stress test of what we've been been trying to achieve and building into our BPM and operational roadmaps anyway. It's been a good stress test for us. And I've seen a real push by our team who, we have all scales of, people that love process change and are the first to challenge the status quo and everything, to people who have, great experience and tenure in the business, but have been in the business, from the ground up. So over a long period of time, where they're cautious about change. So it's getting, again, that happy balance. For us through COVID, workflow enablement has been a really interesting one. Basically, we're not in a fixed office. We're all working from home and working remotely for the most part, apart from our essential services. So really killing paperwork, documentation, killing the need to manually print, fill in documentation and scan that documentation through has been a simple good test of where we need to be agile in our workflow. So yes, we've utilized some available tools to do that, but what I've really enjoyed, for my own situation is, my team saying, well, great, we have this tool which we've been using to tick the box on process ABC. However, I can see us tweaking this and adapting this to never need paper in our business ever again, in the field or in the office. And really, the bottleneck is now me to work with the team to say, yeah, great. The guys have really embraced the tool and, want to be left off to drive these process improvements. So it's great. It's really been a great test of our agility in the business, and our team has really responded and really feel confident to say, we want to do more than we do today. And I'm really excited to say that, post-COVID, our business is going to be in a really strong place. And I think COVID has enabled our team, not just from an operations point of view, but across the board, to really appreciate what everyone does within the business and how we each fit into the bigger picture. And there's much more of an appreciation factor. And I think that mindset shift alone is only going to enable us to get to the next level. And again, I link back, people really understand now the importance of good BPM and utilizing the tools to further support us working, again, smarter, not harder necessarily.
Yeah, great. And for someone listening to this right now, that they're hearing you talk and they've heard us have this conversation that we've gone for about half an hour now, and they have gleaned, I guess, a little from what you've been talking about. Obviously, we can only sort of scrape the surface in a very short interview, but where would you recommend what direction would you point them in if they said, Brendan, I love what you're saying, but I want to learn more about it. I'm in an organisation where our BPM maturity is quite low. We don't have any sort of BPM framework in place, but I want to learn more about this, whether they're senior management or whether they're a lower level employee. Where would you point them? Are there resources? I mean, obviously the internet's got everything, but sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming when you don't really know where to start or where to begin.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I think, obviously, Daniel, I would point people to your podcast and say that's a great place to start. But, in all seriousness, I think trying to establish grow your network, as I said, I'm certainly never the smartest one in the room, but I'll be the first to pick everyone's brain around me and say, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look at what everyone else is doing. So I think utilizing your network, be it, within your business, within your core group of friends and contacts, through LinkedIn is obviously a great opportunity to connect with like-minded people. Podcasts such as yourself really provide great content and insights, because one thing is learning the formal practices and knowing the theory of what makes up good business process management, but it's another thing to walk the talk. So I think these real life examples and these insights, I certainly learn a lot more from, and I think you know, before jumping to all the tools, as I always say, is talk to your team who are responsible for the processes, who have to, you know, live by this and build things from the ground up. And then, you know, you can sense check the strategy in the bigger picture from the top down with the global execs. And, you know, that sweet spot for me is always, it's always a halfway house between those two. And that's the most practical outcome, because we know that's when people are going to walk the talk, in that sweet spot in the middle. So, you know, I just encourage people to you know, ask questions, connect with as much of your network as possible, and really, you know, there's already always someone looking at exactly similar frustrations, similar challenges, and similar opportunities. So yeah, reach out and get connected.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the best lessons do come from obviously trial and error and experiencing the pain yourself and all the victories yourself. But then the next thing is, if you're not already doing it, is to chat to people that are currently, that's what they're doing. You know, it's I guess it feels more real when you're talking with someone that's there. This is what they're going through right now, as opposed to reading some sort of resource or book with more theory type, which is important and valuable, but you know, that I guess they have two different purposes. So, but Brendan, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and for sharing your knowledge. I'm sure that the people that'll be listening to this on the various different platforms, they're going to glean a lot, and I'm sure it's going to spark new ideas in their head and spark conversation, and I'm sure it's going to spark new connections as well as they reach out to their network. So I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today and sharing your knowledge.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.